Good evening, my Lynn and Things family and friends. Welcome on back to the channel, guys. It is your girl Lynn here, and today we're starting our, I guess we could say, book club. So we're going to be doing story time with Lynn today and every Saturday until we finish the book. And our selection is going to be Cicely Tyson, Just As I Am. I am so excited to share this book with you guys. But first, before we get to reading, let's set our ambiance, right? So your girl got one of her favorite candles in here. It's already lit. It is the lemon pound cake by Bath and Body Works. So I got my little candle here, but you want to be comfortable. So if you would like to grab a drink, go ahead and go do that right now. If you would like to light a candle or just sit back comfy like I am on the couch, and let's get ready to dive into this iconic historic woman's story, y'all. I cannot wait. And before I start to read, I did want to kind of show you guys a picture of Cicely and her family. I love that. I love history. I'm not going to tell you guys which one is Cicely, but because I would like for you to tell me down in the comment section. As we start, there is a foreword. And so the foreword is by Viola Davis. And if you don't know who Viola Davis is, honey, if you've ever watched How to Get Away with Murder, or if you've ever watched The Help, she is in both of those and a plethora of other movies and TV shows. She is also another iconic woman of color that I absolutely love. And since we have a foreword, I'm going to use that as a chapter and then chapter 1 for today. So the next time we pick up, we'll be on chapters 3 and 4. So we're going to start off with the foreword. Foreword, A Mighty Seed by Viola Davis. I was introduced to Miss Tyson on the television set in my family's dilapidated apartment in Central Falls, Rhode Island. Oddly, it was a television that rested upon another broken one, a set with aluminum foil on its antenna for better reception. A lot of us probably know a little about that, depending on how old we are. My sisters, Dolores and Diane, sat beside me, cross-legged in front of the screen, and together we witnessed magic. An image that changed my life at the tender age of 7. There was Miss Tyson in the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman, a made-for-TV movie based on the novel by Ernest J. Gaines. In the 1974 film, 110-year-old Pittman reflects on her life, from her enslavement in her early 20s to the day nearly a century later when she defies Jim Crow by sipping from a whites-only water fountain. I couldn't believe the same actress had played both the young woman and the elder one, but Dolores insisted that she had. I stared at my sister and then back at the screen, marveling at Miss Tyson's mastery of her craft. The brilliance with which she had transformed herself, it planted in me a seed that immediately took root. She was the manifestation of excellence in artistry. A dark-skinned, thick-lipped woman who truly mirrored me. I can pinpoint the exact moment when my life opened up. And it was there, in front of that set, that mine did. With one mesmerizing performance, with one gorgeously poignant rendering of her character, Miss Tyson gave me permission to dream. I was no longer the wonder of dreams. For most of my life, dreams were all my siblings and I had. I was born in 1965 in a one-room sharecropper shack on a plantation in South Carolina. My father was illiterate and my mother had only had an 8th grade education. Desperate to support my siblings and me, my parents moved us north. My father was an equestrian who groomed horses and prepared them for racing. And in Rhode Island, he found work. We settled in Central Falls, a mill town, a single square mile in size. Though my father did all he could to piece together a living for us, we still lived in abject poverty, on society's lowest rung. Our deprivation far exceeded the financial. We were the only black family in a town of white Irish Catholics. A family with no sense of ourselves other than an invisible. There was no foundation of self-love or worth for us, no pathway to any kind of achievement. We settled for a time at 128 Washington Street, or 128 as my sisters and I referred to it. That condemned building represented exactly how the world felt about us. It was the demon that sat on my chest during those years. The devil that sat still hangs over me as a painful memory of the trauma. Our third floor rat infested apartment lacked heat, plumbing, and hot water because the pipes froze during the harsh New England winters. There was a single room with electricity, and from that room, a long cord stretched to connect us to the outside world through that foiled antenna television. It was on that screen in 128 that Miss Tyson flickered into my world. In Miss Tyson, I saw a dark-skinned woman with the same fro as my mother, an artist who carried herself with pride and poise. I was more than entertained by the story of Jane Pittman's life. I was mesmerized by Miss Tyson's ability to transport me from my world to hers, to a place where I didn't have to wade through garbage bins in search of food covered in maggots, a place where the demon of my chest disappeared for a time. Even as a child, I knew I wanted more than 128, wanted more than that rat-infested existence we endured. Watching Jane Pittman, I saw my ticket out of poverty and shame. Miss Tyson, the daughter of immigrants, had herself risen out of poverty and onto the global stage. In her journey, I glimpsed possibilities for my own. For hours in our bedroom, my sisters and I would try to imitate everything about Miss Tyson. Her piercing gaze, those eyes brimming with memory and emotion, the way she held her jaw, how she was so fully embodied her characters. By the time I was 14, I was so intent on following in her path that I took a bus to an acting class 2 hours away. Since my family didn't have a car, there I was, a complete geek in my gaucho pants and my purple mascara, doing all I could to imbue the characters with the empathy Miss Tyson brought to her portrayals. I wanted to be exceptional at my craft, and more than anything, I wanted to be like her. Before I knew her, Miss Tyson had already made a name for herself as an accomplished actor, engraving on our narratives into the storybook of the world. For 6 decades, Miss Tyson has shown us who we are: vulnerable, magnificent, pain-ridden, and beautifully human. Time and time again, she has put our humanity on display, never compromising her dignity while creating a new chapter in Black history. In 1963, during the filming of the series East Side, West Side, she arrived on set, rocking her fro, becoming the first Black woman to wear her natural hair on TV. Yet terms like trailblazer and pioneer don't fully capture what she means to so many of us who looked up to her as the epitome of Black strength. Miss Tyson is the master truth teller, a warrior with fierce courage and supreme artistry. Her instrument precisely tuned to tell stories that capture our being. Over the years, I've held close to Miss Tyson's brave spirit as I've admired her work from afar. Then, in 2011, on the set of The Help, I finally met my muse. There before me on a muggy afternoon in Mississippi stood the divine giver of gifts, the legend who had inspired me to act. I embraced her, tears spilling from my eyes as I stammered through a flurry of thank you, none of them conveying the depth of my gratitude. We had no scenes together in the movie, and I wasn't on set with Miss Tyson when she filmed her segments as Constantine. But the director, Tate Tyler, recalled the dedication she brought to her work. She showed up on set in character and remained that way, insisting that she be called Constantine at all times. That's just who Miss Tyson is. Excellence personified. Toward the end of 2014, I asked my role model to play Ophelia, the mother of my character, Annalise, on the ABC series How to Get Away with Murder. In life, Miss Tyson had nurtured and mentored me. On the set, she would do the same. Though in a way that initially caught me off guard, she just turned 90 years old then, y'all. And then she strode in, already steeped in the tense history between mother and daughter. As she entered, I stood there with an enormous smile on my face, and my arms were outstretched to hug her. She marched right past me, reprimanding me with her stern expression. A mother putting a child in her place. She knew that if she had broken the moment by stepping out of character, her portrayal wouldn't be the same. Faced with that wall, I laughed and thought, well, maybe I need to get working. During our scenes in Murder, I experienced her ingenuity up close, with just her demeanor, with those lucid and revealing eyes, with traces of pain on her brow. Miss Tyson often took viewers someplace you can only go if you've been there. That is because she does not simply act. She bears every corner of her soul, and in doing so, she accomplishes what all great arts does. She makes us feel less alone. A few years later, when Miss Tyson heard I had been nominated for an Academy Award for Fences, she called to congratulate me. I clutched the phone giddy like a 7-year-old. I had been watching her play Jane Pittman all those winters ago. I know the road you're on, she told me. By that she meant she understood the world that a dark-skinned actress not seen as conventionally beautiful was navigating. She knew the barriers in the industry, in all the ways, explicit and covert, that someone with my nose and my lips and my hair is told she isn't enough. She was aware of how we black women are expected to water down our complexity, how our pathology is seldom allowed exposure within the narratives written for us. She had confronted those obstacles. At the end of our call, she urged me to relish the path ahead, the accolades, all of it. Just as she'd once granted me permission to dream, she now nudged me to delight in the bounty. Here she was offering me another gem, this time as a wise ally, lifting her lantern to light my way. This book is Miss Tyson's abundant treasure to each of us, her life and her words, just as she is. She shares truths usually whispered between sisters and close friends in the dim light of a back bedroom. Those candid declarations not often spoken aloud. And she tells her story the way only a black woman can, in all of its dazzling authenticity, heels off and voice undulating, shifting between anguish and exuberance. The art of acting is the art of exposing, an emotional unveiling before others. Miss Tyson is as revelatory on these pages as she has been on the stage. She is not just a performer who has so deftly captured the breadth of the human experience. With all of its unslicked edges, she is CICELY the woman, someone who has grappled with the fears and fragilities many of us carry. And during a season when so much in our culture is changing so quickly, she has now blessed us with a timeless jewel, her written legacy. And what a heritage it is. One not gauged by her number of extraordinary roles, but by her countless lives, like my own, that she has lifted. You'll never see a U-Haul behind a hearse, Denzel Washington often said as we worked together on Fences. I don't care how much money you have or what level of notoriety you have achieved, you can't take any of it with you. There is a cap on earthly success, a ceiling on the amount of joy that possessions and awards can bring before disillusionment sets in. Our appearance, our prosperity, the applause, all of it is so fleeting. But a life of true significance has unlimited impact. It is measured in how well we've loved those around us, how much we've given away, how many seeds we're sown along our path. During her 96 years, Miss Tyson has discovered the potent elixir. She has lived a life that is bigger than she is, an existence grounded in purpose and flourishing in service to others. That is her defining masterpiece. That is her enduring gift to us all. So that is our foreword by Viola Davis. I'm going to take just a little break and then we're going to get into chapter 1. Okay, guys, I hope if you had to get up and go run and do something right quick, now we're going to get back to the story. This is the introduction, and it says, This Life. I never intended to write an autobiography. Decades ago, after I presented an award to Barbara Jordan, the trailblazing civil rights activist and the first African American elected to the Texas Senate, I asked her, "When are you going to write your book?" A smile spread across Barbara's face. "When I have something to say," she said. She told me in that moment, I decided that if a woman as accomplished as Barbara could get away with such a reply, so could I. Years later, a gentleman from the Washington Post interviewed me. "When are you going to write your book?" he asked. And just as I had been doing for quite some time by then, I borrowed Barbara's response. "When I have something to say," I told him. "Well, I've been talking to you for 3 hours," he says, chuckling. "And it sounds like to me you got plenty to say." I nodded and gave him the same wry grin Barbara had given me those so many years ago, with no plan of ever committing my story to page. Back then, I did not see an autobiography as personal. I thought of it as a written record of a public journey. For me, an account of my stage and film roles, the parts of my experience in view of the world. It would be my story through the lens of Miss Jane Pittman, through Rebecca and Sounder, and Benta and Roots. To be sure, there are traces of who I am in every woman I have portrayed. In the tenacity of Harriet Tubman and the quiet strength of Coretta Scott King, I can be glimpsed. In the trembling fingers of Constantine in The Help, and in the determination of Miss Carrie Watts in The Trip to the Bountiful. My thumbprint is recognizable. Every one of these characters has left me with an emotional, spiritual, and psychological inheritance I will forever carry with me. But while each in some way reflected me, none could reveal who I am in my entirety. A few years ago, my manager, Larry Thompson, started in on me again about writing a memoir. "You've got to do a book," he said one afternoon. "Yeah, you and the world think that," I told him, shaking my head. "No, I'm serious," he persisted. "It's time." I uttered the same refrain I had been repeating to him for months. The lights and the trimmings of my career, the accolades, as far as I was concerned, none of it needed to be recounted. For me, the greatest gratification has come in refining my craft, not in gazing upon its merits. He stared at me for a long time. "You're talking about a Christmas tree?" he finally said. "What?" I asked. "Everybody thinks they know who Cicely Tyson is," he explained. "But what they see are the ornaments on the branches, the decorations. They know nothing about the roots." That conversation is what planted the seed for Just As I Am. Larry's observation captured for the first time what I have felt for so many years. The glitter, the ribbons, the garnish. As wonderful as those things are, I have little desire to reflect on them solely. What I am far more interested in is how my tree, my story, first sprang into existence. How its roots, stretching far beneath the soil, have nourished and anchored me. How each tree ring whispers memories sometimes too troubling for me to recall. How its bark and rugged exterior have both guarded and grounded me. Every one of my experiences on the public stage has been rooted in my upbringing. Those years spent at my mother's elbow and on my father's knee, that foundation, that rich earth, has given birth to who I am. Even now, in the winter of my life, I am just beginning to truly understand my identity. Every holiday season in the heart of New York's Rockefeller Center, a spruce stands, proud and glistening in a magnificent exposition. And yet its display is but a snapshot of that tree's history, one brief and final episode in its lifespan. The thousands of lights adorning its branches disclose nothing about its path, about its nurturing and growth over the decades. Only when that tree is stripped of its embellishments does it bear its scars and show its true nature. Just as I am is my truth. It is me, plain and unvarnished, with the glitter and the garland set aside. In these pages, I am indeed Cicely, the actress who has been blessed to grace the stage for 6 decades. Yet I am also the church girl who once rarely spoke a word. I am the teenager who sought solace in the verses of the old hymn for which this book is named. I am a daughter and a mother, a sister and a friend. I am an observer of human nature and the dreamer of audacious dreams. I am a woman who has hurt immeasurably as I have loved, a child of God divinely guided by his hand. And here in my 9th decade, I am a woman who, at long last, has something meaningful to say. I stand amazed at this tree, this life. I stare up in awe at its branches. Raising up toward heaven, I wonder about its origins, how a seed so minuscule could grow into a structure so vast and resilient. I'm still examining its genesis. To examine, to question, to discover and evolve. That is what it means to be alive. The day we cease to explore is the day we begin to wilt. I share my testimony in these pages not because I have reached any lasting conclusions, but because I have so much to understand. I am as inquisitive about life now as I was as a child. My story will never be finished, nor should it be. For as long as God grants me breath, I will be living and writing my next chapter. And now we are on part 1 or chapter 1, and it is part 1 is planted. It says, like a tree planted by the water, I shall not be moved. Negro spiritual. So this is chapter 1, the vow. I know instantly whether I should take a role. If my skin tingles as I read the script, then it is absolutely something I must do. But if my stomach churns, I do not touch the project. Because if I did, I'll end up on a psychiatrist's couch. Either my spirit can take the story or it cannot, and my senses have never misled me. That is how I knew with unequivocal assurance that I was meant to act in Sounder, the 1972 film about a loving family struggle during Depression. What I didn't know is how Sounder's tide would carry me toward a profound purpose, one spawned by comments from strangers. The role offered to me in the film wasn't the one I would have chosen. We want you to play the school teacher, the producers said to me as they handed me the script. Yet, as I read the story, I felt certain I was meant to portray the mother, Rebecca, the wife of Nathan. Nathan was his family's backbone. Rebecca in its robust and steady heartbeat. In that mom's devotion, in the tender way she cared for the 3 children, even as she rested her palm in the small of her back, I recognized my own mother. But you're too young, too pretty, too sexy to play the mom, they tell her. I was told. I was 47 years old then, y'all. 47. Though, for the years at that suggestion, at first from the director, Warren Coleman, I had been claiming to be a full decade younger. With taut cocoa skin clinging to my secret, what does my appearance have to do with acting? I retorted. Amused that I, a schoolgirl once called a skinny little nappy head, was now being ruled out as too attractive. As an artist, I should be able to play anyone. But the producers wouldn't hear of it. 3 months went by and the team was still searching for an actress to play Rebecca. Meanwhile, feeling no less convinced that I was destined for the role, I had Rebecca's lines down. Do you hear me? After another month had passed, I received a call from Bill Haber, my agent at the time. Well, he said, exhaling into the receiver, you got the role of the mother. I didn't say a word. Did you hear me? He pressed. Yeah, I heard you, I answered calmly. So when do we begin? But aren't you excited? He asked. About what? I said. I knew all the time that the role was mine. I was just waiting for them to discover it. An actress that producers had gone after had wanted more money than they were willing to pay, and so she passed on the film. I could have saved them the trouble of their negotiations because the role was never for her. The money wasn't much, Haber explained. I'd earned about $6,000, a pittance even in those days. Yet I would have taken the role for half of that. It's how convinced I was that Rebecca was my character. When filming began in Baton Rouge in spring of 1971, the nation had teetered off balance. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was gone, his life sliced short 3 years earlier by a bullet thundering across a hotel balcony. On that fateful evening in Memphis, the civil rights movement had lost not only its leader, but its way, wandering in search of a new path forward. It was in this America, one grieving and limping from a deep racial reckoning, the blaxploitation cinema found a fertile audience. In a spate of films during the early 70s depicting urban life, the black man, muted over centuries by bigotry's cruel muzzle, at last got to play the hero in his own storyline. But this newfound creative freedom came at a cost. In my mind, these films gave rise to a misery more harrowing than the realities they portrayed. The black woman was often cast in a powerless supporting role or as a hypersexual female eager to fall into bed. Ghetto life and vulgarity were glorified. Even still, theater goers seemed ravenous for this movie genre, and directors, driven by the profits, rushed to satiate the appetite. During this period, a producer had the gall to say to me, I'm not going to say the word, but y'all know the N word, want sex and violence, and we planned to give them both. He didn't even flinch when he said it. Given the box office success of films such as Sweet Sweet Back's Bad Song, making a movie about a tight-knit black family of Louisiana sharecroppers took some nerve. Mary Ritt, a gem of a director, clearly had plenty of it. With characteristic zeal, he forged ahead filming Sounder, which was based on an award-winning children's novel and adapted for the screen by Lon Elder. I did not know how the movie would ultimately resonate, nor was that my chief concern. I was focused on emptying my soul into Rebecca, my first lead role in a major film. Sharing the stage with me was Paul Winfield, who played Nathan, and Kevin Hooks, who portrayed David, the eldest of our children, and the son who narrates the story. Paul, who'd already become known for his star turn in 1968 NBC's sitcom Julia, with my beloved friend Diane Carroll, was to be Sounders' headliner. I, then in the infancy of my film career, wasn't slated to even have my name listed on the movie's poster. Circumstances would later have something to say about that. Before Sounders' release, I traveled across the country on a promotional tour with some of the other cast members. From San Francisco to Boston, Indianapolis to Richmond, reporters who'd previewed the movie gathered to interview me about the production. It was during my stop in Philadelphia that the earth quaked. Among the group of reporters stood a Caucasian gentleman, auburn hair and around 30 years old. He cleared his throat, lifted the microphone to his lips, and locked his gaze on me. I have a confession to make, he said slowly, as if calculating the impact of what he would reveal. I never thought of myself as being the least bit prejudiced, he says. But as I watched the film, I just could not believe that the son was calling his father Daddy. That's what my son calls me. Silence blanketed the room. Well, child, I'll tell you, my mouth fell open like a broken pocketbook. As the man's words shuddered through me, I forced a smile. But all the while I was thinking, my Lord, how appalling. This man clearly knew nothing about our shared humanity. He had no understanding of God's multi-hued creation, of his place next to yours and mine in that colorful family mosaic. From his perspective, there had to be something radically wrong with a black child calling his father Daddy, a term he thought reserved for his own kind. How could Nathan, once declared 3/5 human by our Constitution. Be worthy of such endearment. How could a fraction of a man stand forehead to forehead with him? That would put Nathan on par with all those born into the privilege of whiteness, as he had been. I don't know what stunned me more, the fact that the man believed what he did, or that he had the audacity to say it out loud. After a lengthy pause, I regained my composure and my tongue. I have to congratulate you, sir, I said, my tone tinged with sarcasm. It takes a lot of courage to stand up here in the midst of your peers and admit you never thought you were prejudiced until you saw the film. Thank you. I was so disturbed by what I had heard in that moment. This was the only response that I could muster. I left that press conference saying to myself, maybe it's just this one. Surely, amid the shrill call for equality sounded during those years, there couldn't be many who shared this man's view. That is how I attempted to console myself. Yet, as I continued touring the country, I became acquainted with an America I'd seldom encountered up to then. At the time, I considered myself fairly knowledgeable about this nation. I had always called home. I'd grown up in New York and lived either there or in Los Angeles, two culturally progressive cities. But outside of that bubble, in the many towns and communities I regularly flew over, the seed of Dr. King's dream might have been sown, but it obviously had not germinated. During a stop in the Midwest, another reporter's comment reinforced that notion. I didn't know that black men and women had that kind of loving relationship that we see between Nathan and Rebecca, a young woman said. Their connection didn't seem believable to me. I was taken aback by her assessment that I did not respond. So seldom had black families been portrayed nurturing one another on screen, that when art indeed imitated life, the truth of that narrative was met with deep skepticism. Embedded in this woman's observation was an assumption that lives that lives at the center of all bias. You are not like me. You are intrinsically different, and that difference deems you inferior. I recognize these comments for what they were: pure ignorance. Anger would have been the justified response, and for a time in private, I certainly was apoplectic. But as life has taught me more than once, resentment corrodes the veins of the person who carries it. These reporters' beliefs, however offensive they may have been to me, were not a bitterness to be nursed. They were a lesson to be heeded. So rather than recoiling in exasperation at the ideas expressed, I leaned in and listened intently at every remaining tour stop. Much of what I heard mimicked what those two reporters had dared voice. And the more aware I became of the bigotry that existed against black people, what might have been a reason to seethe became for me a reason to pursue my craft with new purpose. I returned home from the road saying to myself, sister, you got some educating to do. It was at this juncture that I made a conscious decision. I would use my profession as my platform, a stage from which to make my voice heard by carefully choosing my projects and portrayals. I could not afford the luxury of simply being an actress. Yes, I was already selecting only those roles that gave me goosebumps, just as Rebecca and Sounder had. But as an artist with the privilege of the spotlight, I felt an enormous responsibility to use that forum as a force for good, as a place from which to display the full spectrum of our humanity. My heart to both mirror the times and propel them forward. I was determined to do all I could to alter the narrative about black people, to change the way black women in particular were perceived by reflecting our dignity. When I made the choice to pursue acting, the last thing in the world I intended to be was an actress for the cause. Like most artists, I expected to continually hone my craft by playing all types of roles with little consideration for how those portrayals might impact the cultural dialogue. But the racial climate called for something more of me. And while traveling this great land, I resolved to answer in the one way I knew how. Never once during the billowing smoke of the civil rights movement would I be spotted at a Woolworth lunch counter, braving a sit-in while hate mongers hurled spit and spite. Never would I parade up and down the boulevards of Selma or Montgomery, a picket sign thrust high alongside my shouts. I admired the valiant freedom fighters who took to the streets, but it wasn't in my makeup to demonstrate in these ways. Nonetheless, I was set on speaking in the only place I felt courageous enough to do so, on the stage. I protested using not my own words, but those of the characters I inhabited. 50 years after I made a silent pact with myself to play women whose legacies uplift us, that vow still guides me to this day. This life is something. When you've lived as long as I have, others always seem to be asking, "How are you?" I'm here, still, I'm fond of responding. God must have more work for me to do that I haven't done yet. Over nearly a century, I have witnessed the times shifting even as I've watched them come swinging back around, full circle, to the moment we are standing in today. There is more of this glorious pilgrimage in the rearview mirror than there is ahead. When I think now on the promise I made all those seasons ago, I recognize it as a defining moment, one from which scores others would follow. And what preceded that pivot was a miracle that confounds me. That a reticent girl, born in the slums and bathed in the mighty timbre of a church organ, ever stumbled into such a grand arena. Okay, guys, that is all of chapter 1 and the foreword. I hope you guys have enjoyed that. Oh my goodness. And y'all, that is just the beginning. So remember, we're going to meet back up next Saturday so that we can read chapters 2 and 3. I think I said 3 and 4. I meant 2 and 3. Since we had a foreword in chapter 1, we're going to pick up at chapter 2. Let me know, in the comments, something that maybe sparked you. If there was something that you remember or something that is like, oh my gosh, wow. Go ahead and put that down in the comment section. And thank you guys so much for all of you who sat through this and listened to this and are interested in this. I am so happy to have you guys. Thank you to all my subbies. And if you're new, thank you for subbing to this channel. I'm usually doing Dollar Tree hauls, so this is a new thing. This is just started. This is Story Time with Lynn, and I will be doing this every Saturday, doing 2 chapters of this here book. Thank you guys so much. Talk to you in the next video. See you next Saturday.